Here's an interesting old radio that I'm going to restore. It's an Emerson model DS-436. The same chassis was placed in other boxes and known as a DS-365 or DS-372 period. My father bought it used from a well-to-do friend in the later 1940s when his friend was moving up to something fancier. It's a table radio. It has an 8-inch upward-facing speaker. It has push-pull 6L6 power output stage. That's more than many consoles had at the time. And it has a tuned RF stage. The radio is the AM broadcast band only. There are no shortwave bands and no FM. The cabinet is advertised on the back as made by Ingram. That was a clock manufacturer, and apparently they made wooden cabinets for their clocks, and they found another market for their products in making radio cabinets. It has a nice walnut burl veneer on the front of it, and walnut veneers on the side and top as well. The radio has a solid or a fixed back on it, and you access the chassis by dropping it down through the bottom. This radio has an added phono input and switch. Over on the very right side of the chassis is the phono input, but this one has a little device added here with the switch and an RCA jack on it. I don't know if that was an Emerson edition or if it was an aftermarket thing from somebody else. The radio also has a switch to choose either the internal loop antenna or external antennas. The loudspeaker, which you probably can't see very well right now, is an 8-inch, again upward-facing electrodynamic speaker. And it's a pretty good chassis. The radio does have a tuning eye tube, as they often did then. Here's a view of the bottom. Another restorer noted online that the solid wood bottom interferes with ventilation for the chassis, and that in his radio the resistors were pretty well cooked underneath the chassis. So he replaced his solid wood bottom with a metal mesh bottom. I think I may just try setting off the bottom with some shims to allow air circulation around it. Maybe drill a couple holes right in the middle. Maybe just, again, set it off with shims so it's not right snug against the chassis, and allow a little more ventilation. It's always good to have more air rather than less. But this is how you remove the chassis. You remove that bottom wooden plate, and then there's 4 screws that drop the chassis straight down through the bottom of the cabinet. Here you can see the louvers in the top of the cabinet for the speaker, which is upward facing. And around here, the end veneer, nice walnut. The lower section there, the base of the cabinet, is as usual a lesser wood, and it was stained and lacquered to make it look like walnut. That'll need some touch up. The whole cabinet will need a little bit of touching up, but it's in pretty good shape to start with. The front dial here, the cover is a piece of plastic which is warped from age and probably heat exposure sitting in an attic when it was stored, and I'll have to come up with some solution to that. The radio will also need all new capacitors and probably a lot of resistors, and that'll be the next step. I'll do some more videos here when the radio is farther along. Well, here's the Emerson radio hanging like a bat upside down. I made a little fixture to hold it so I could work on it upside down. Right now it's sitting on top of my table saw in the shop, which is the only bare space I have available. And if we rotate around here, you can see today's project, which was recapping. The other day I did the filter capacitors, and today I did the wax paper capacitors. all but 4 of them that I don't have the right values for. I have to order those up, but I got a lot of them done. It was kind of a slow going because most of these radios are assembled in one sequence and then we have to work on them in a different sequence. There were some capacitors fairly well hidden away, hard to get to and so on, but I think I've got it in pretty good order now. I did find when I was doing this 2 unsoldered joints. I don't know what the practices were in the Emerson plant when they were making these radios, but somebody missed a couple of them completely as far as I could tell. They were crimped around a lug but not soldered. I think I've done better. I hope so. Hope I haven't missed any myself. Again, I need to order up 4 more capacitors and then put those in, and then it should be about ready to go. I'll do some mid-project shots here. This is the chassis, mostly recapped. I'm waiting for my order of some of the odd values that I did not have on hand. You can see 2 paper shells of electrolytic caps at the bottom and left side. I just took the innards out of those, left the cardboard shells, and poked the new electrolytics inside those. And again, most of the caps have been replaced already. There are three that remain to be done, waiting for my order to come in. Over here we have the radio cabinet itself. It has a new dial cover, plastic. The old one was 1941 vintage, and heat and age and such had caused it to shrink and twist a little bit. So I ordered up a new one, which I presume is in much better quality plastic. Probably lasts longer, it's a lot clearer, and it fits. And I've got it glued in there. And I've just done up the finish. First I took linseed oil and turpentine and vinegar mixture to it. And then tonight I augmented that with a little bit of Howard's Finish Restore to add a little bit more color. And especially on some of the edges that were a little dinged up. And it looks pretty good. And just for the fun of it, here's a view from the bottom. You can see the 8-inch electrodynamic speaker there, the new dial cover plastic. The speaker faces upward, and you mount the chassis from the bottom. It doesn't come out the back, which is solid and glued in right here, but again, it goes up from the bottom. Probably because the speaker would have been in the way otherwise. Here's what the Emerson looks like with all new capacitors and a bunch of new resistors, not all of them. If you look near the power transformer and then over to the left, you'll see 2 of the old dog bone resistors that I left in. They were measuring right on still. A bunch of other resistors had drifted, mostly up, and I replaced those. The 2 old cardboard tubes for filter caps are empty except for the new caps tucked inside of them. Other than that, I didn't worry too much about looks. I figured that the yellow capacitors won't be visible. This radio was wired in kind of a haphazard fashion. I mean, it's not, the components don't necessarily show up near where their function is. Everything was kind of wild and woolly. So I left things placed as they were, replaced them with new, but left everything in pretty much the same position. Now that I've got everything tucked in here, I'm going to take the radio off of my chassis stand here and put it back into the case and fire it up on the dim bulb tester and see what happens. We hope for the best. And here's a quick view of the chassis back in the cabinet, upside down since it goes in from the bottom. And I don't have the bottom on it yet. I'll leave that off until we fire it up and see what happens.
And the Lord said, now that I made a bird, I'm gonna look all around for a little old word that sounds about sweet like a turtle's dove. And I guess I'm gonna call it love, and you're on the world, looking everywhere. We're getting love from here, love from there, and put it all in a little old fire of my baby's heart. Oh, honeycomb, baby, well, the honeycomb be my home. Got a hank of hair and a piece of bone that made a walking, talking honeycomb. Well,
A joke. Oh, right. It's gonna bother him. Right.
Oh, absolutely.
All under repair collapse in that zone. Educators really had a big.
I just, you know, it's painful.
With
You can't smile, get up and dance, smile. There's a big old plan and you got a reason to smile. When you think you can't smile. I held my nose, I closed my eyes.
I took a drink.
I didn't know it was a day or night. I started kissing everything in sight. But when I kissed the cop at 34th and Vine, you put my little bottle of love potion number 9. Love potion number 9. I knew you when you were lonely. I knew you when you were lonely. A girl all alone without love.
Okay, you can hear it's working. I'm happy. The bass is a tiny bit flabby. I had to squirt some cleaner in the volume control. I think I've got to lubricate the tuning capacitor grounding straps a little bit, because at a couple points in the dial I get oscillation unless I run it back and forth a couple times. Then it goes away. But you can see my tuning eye glowing there. And everything's in pretty good order. I'm pleased. Good to have a project turn out properly.